President Nelson, your job is to work it out in your mind, as we spoke of yesterday. The scriptures say that you're supposed to go and find all the information you can on it, and then work it out in your mind, and then you're supposed to come up with the truth and the revelation. This doesn't come from prayer alone, President Nelson. So, truthfully, people like Katie and myself and many others who are from the LGBT community, you're supposed to be listening to them to get all the truths and all the facts that you can, so that when you go to pray about it for guidance for the entire church, you're informed and God has something to work with as He inspires you on what to do and how to lead. So to place Katie and myself out here as the reason you won't act on this is truly, it's contrary to what Scripture actually says you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get all the knowledge you can. And the reality is, President Nelson, I am certain that a child suffering from same-sex attraction is going to die when they feel no sense of worth because they couldn't pray it away. They're going to lose their faith in God. Also, their own parents, sadly, are going to attack them. Some of them even get thrown out of their house because of the homophobia that you, and not just you, but those ahead of you, placed in the parents. A child's going to die if you let your pride get in the way of this. A child's life is on the line if you let your pride of me and Katie and myself and others telling you gets in your way of not doing your homework on this, not doing your due diligence. Being a lazy learner, President Nelson, don't be one, because lives are in the balance. You have the power to change the culture. So when a child is born with same sex, they're presented with love. That's the message Christ gave. He didn't say judge your child. He said to love them. So that the parents who have a same-sex child can love exactly as Christ taught. You know something? I followed you, and I followed those ahead of you on this. And I was trying to understand the same-sex issue before my son died. Was he gay? I don't know. I do know that the friend that he brought to Boy Scouts before, they got him, he was the reason. He brought a neighbor kid to Boy Scouts, and he hid behind my son. And he came home and said, Dad, as soon as we got to, this is a brand new friend he just barely met, brand new friend. And he took him to Boy Scouts with him and two boys on the street. And once they arrived, this boy became terrified and hid behind my son. And my son came home, and he said, Dad, as soon as we arrived to the Boy Scouts at the church, this new friend of mine, became terrified. And I said, why? And he hid behind my son, actually. And I said, well, why? And he said, because he didn't know why, actually. But I'll tell you when I did find out why. I found out after my son was already dead. That's when I found out. And I went and heard the story of this child. And what he told me, this new neighbor kid, 13-year-old, had just barely met, what he told me is the boys from the church had been calling him faggot. This is a non-member. Here, our family's doing good missionary work, We had almost every single kid on that street come to the church. That's the kind of missionary family we are. We love the church. We were trying to share the church. And because we did exactly what church leaders taught, and we had at least 10 kids from the neighborhood on that street at the church within 2 months of moving into that house. But sadly, 2 of those boys, specifically one, had already been a target of boys in the ward, been calling him faggot for months. And we knew that boy was suicidal, and I didn't completely understand why before my son died, actually. I knew the child was in trouble, the new friend. And so, as a family, we embraced that child. We took him to the 7-Eleven. We took him to dinner. We showed him love, welcome to the house. And I knew that child was in trouble. And my son, about 2 to 3 weeks before he died, he came to me and he said, Dad, do you think we're saving his life? And I said, you know what, son? I think you're saving his life. But what I didn't know is that my son got pulled into that by simply being seen with this child. And he was kind of a smaller child at the time. He's grown to be bigger and stronger now. But as 13, he was kind of small, a late bloomer. And he talked a little bit funny. He's an easy target, terribly easy target for abuse. And because my son and our family brought him in, the boys at the church started calling him faggot, my son. It got spread to the school. It's all well documented. It's in chat logs for months. And the night before he died, my son was called faggot over 80 times. It's documented. Something the church didn't want to investigate. But that word is so damaging.
You know, that should be called the second F word. You know,
Yeah.
Brian and I are both Generation X. And when we were growing up, we saw the disappearance of the N word.
Yeah, we did.
Because that was used. And when I was going to high school, I didn't know what that second F word was, but I heard it used a lot. And people disparaged by it. That should be eliminated. So should the word whore for girls.
And slut.
And slut.
Absolutely. Those
Yes.
are suicide triggers.
Those three words are serious suicide triggers. So, we're supposed to be, the Latter-day Saint people should be becoming more refined people. We should be becoming a light to the world, and we should be a more loving people as Christ taught, and an example to others. But when you're not removing the word faggot from the vocabulary, it is the second F word. But unfortunately, with the first F word, nobody dies of suicide from that one, But use of the second F word, there's children dying of suicide from that word. It's so much more serious. So, President Nelson, you have the power to change the culture on this, to give a little bit more humility in science. Some children are born in different bodies, as I've described earlier. And the use of the F word, the second F word, this is a no-go. This is a disciplinary issue here. Same as smoking a cigarette or drinking a coffee. It's kind of sad. You can drink a coffee and you'll be called into the bishop's office immediately for discipline. And it's firm and it's corrective. But you can literally bully a child to death by calling them faggot every day for months. And that's something the church is going to cover up. The policy of the church is going to cover it up. The culture of the church is going to cover that up. President Nelson, you have the power in your hands to save lives and to change the culture. And exactly how to make the LGBT community feel welcome. I don't have all the answers. But I know to not abuse them, that's a start. To make the use of the second F word a taboo, a serious taboo. It's an easy low fruit move that you could announce, and immediately in the church there would be a huge response. The Latter-day Saint people are a faithful people. They'll follow your instructions and they'll follow your guidance. You can make change.
I also wanted to talk about how, because Brian and I are both Generation X, and President Nelson's, I think, the one before Boomer, silent
Actually,
generation.
notch is what they I believe they call them a notch. Boomer and then notch.
Okay.
Or the lost generation. I'm not sure.
But, I think that's part of the problem here, too, is because